A Christmas Heist. It was Christmas, the most unforgettable crime Flambo would ever confess to. The master thief, now reflecting in his old age, could hardly believe it himself. But this wasn't just any crime. It was a masterpiece of its kind, executed in a cozy, quintessential English home, complete with a crescent carriage drive and a majestic monkey tree that stood proudly in the garden. He had carefully chosen this place, just as any artist would choose the perfect canvas. But for Flambo, every crime had to match the season, the atmosphere, an intricate dance between crime and its environment. As he tells it, Flambo had always found a strange delight in weaving his acts of mischief into the very fabric of their surroundings. From the lush green lawns of cathedral towns to the bleak gray towers of France, each heist was an artwork, a crime against time, against tradition. But this time was different. This crime, this theft, was not just another heist. It was a Christmas crime, a crime straight out of Charles Dickens' world. A charming English house near Putney, tucked away in the gentle warmth of the holidays, was the perfect setting for his grand final act. It was a home where a simple stable stood beside a grand house, where a monkey tree cast long shadows over the garden. It was a crime he would forever regret, yet the crime that, ironically, shaped his redemption. Now, from the outside, Flambo's tale was utterly perplexing. It would take someone with the right eyes to see it, and that someone, my friends, was the ever-wonderful Father Brown. But we'll get to him in a bit. Let's dive into the heart of the action, the moment everything changed. Picture this. It's the afternoon of Boxing Day, a quiet winter day that seemed to stretch endlessly into a canvas of ruby-red hues. Flambo, now in the background, watches as a young lady, dressed in rich brown furs, steps out into the garden, carrying a basket of bread for the birds. Her face, a picture of bravery and beauty, was framed by a scarf, but it was her eyes that shone the brightest, full of life and wonder. But the scene wasn't as serene as it seemed, for beyond the garden there was movement, swift and unexpected. A figure, almost ghostly against the fading light, was perched atop a high garden wall, ready to leap down into the unknown. "Don't jump, Mr. Crook!" the young lady cried out in alarm. "It's much too high." And there he was, Mr. Crook, tall, angular, with dark hair that stuck out like a wild brush, and an almost otherworldly complexion. His red tie, a striking contrast to the dull grays around him, was the only part of his appearance that seemed to matter. In an instant, Mr. Crook leapt down with the grace of a cat, landing effortlessly at her side. "I think I was meant to be a burglar," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. "But I wasn't born in the right house next door. It's all a matter of where you are, you see." The young lady, obviously startled by his bizarre statement, couldn't help but chuckle. "You are a strange one, Mr. Crook," she said with a smile, "but you've certainly made things interesting." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of a motor horn, sharp, confident, and full of purpose. A sleek, pale green car arrived at the front doors of the house, its elegance undeniable, its speed unmatched. "Well, well," Mr. Crook said with a grin. "Seems like someone knows how to make an entrance." The car door opened, revealing none other than Sir Leopold Pfizer, the city magnate, known for his fortune, his ruthlessness, and, as Flambo would learn, for his mysterious ties to our story. "Ah, Miss Adams, it seems your Santa Claus just got a little more modern." Mr. Crook's eyes twinkled with curiosity as he looked at the lady beside him. "A man of mystery, just like you." As they all gathered around, the scene was set for an encounter that would forever change the fate of Flambo, and perhaps the fate of Father Brown's work as well. The drama, so beautifully weaved together by Chesterton, was only beginning. And it was a story that, from here on out, would keep you guessing, gripping your seat with every twist and turn. As Sir Leopold Pfizer, the esteemed financier, stepped out of the car, it was clear this was no ordinary arrival. The process of unloading him from the motor car was so meticulous it seemed almost theatrical. A large chauffeur in green emerged from the front of the car, followed by a small, tidy manservant in gray. Together, they began what could only be described as unpacking Sir Leopold, a careful operation involving layers of rugs, furs from every corner of the animal kingdom, and scarves in every hue imaginable. It was as though they were revealing a rare, well-protected artifact. And there, at the center of this extravagant display, was Sir Leopold, an old man with a proud goat-like beard and a smile that could have lit up the darkest room. His gloved hands rubbed together eagerly, almost as if savoring the moment. He was a man who had grown used to being admired, but this was something else. The doors of the grand porch opened, and out stepped Colonel Adams, the proud father of the young lady, Ruby Adams. He was a tall, sunburned figure with a red smoking cap perched like a fez on his head, giving him an almost exotic air, like some British officer straight from the deserts of Egypt. Behind him, his brother-in-law, James Blount, a boisterous young Canadian farmer with a yellow beard, followed. And just to complete the odd collection, there was Father Brown, the priest who had somehow managed to become a regular guest despite his nondescript appearance. The grand entrance hall of the house was as imposing as the rest of the building. It was spacious, filled with sunlight streaming from the high windows, and on the wall, the colonel's sword hung proudly. But the true drama was in the air, a feeling of suspense, as Sir Leopold, his mountain of wraps finally removed, revealed his Christmas gift for his goddaughter. "Now, my dear," Sir Leopold said with a certain flair, "I've brought you something truly special." His hands trembled slightly as he pulled out a black oval case. With an air of self-satisfaction that could have made anyone roll their eyes, he opened it with a flourish. Inside, resting delicately on a bed of orange velvet, were 3 diamonds, pure and brilliant, the flying stars. They sparkled like nothing anyone had ever seen. For a moment, it was as if the very air around them was charged with energy, each diamond burning brighter than the last. Ruby's eyes widened, and the room fell silent with awe. Even the colonel, though typically composed, could not hide his shock. Sir Leopold's grin stretched even wider as he basked in their admiration. "These, my dear, are the most extraordinary diamonds, stolen so often that even the toughest criminals cannot keep their hands off them. You see, I could have lost them on my journey here, quite easily. They're that tempting." Mr. Crook, the young man with the red tie, let out a low growl. I wouldn't blame them if they'd snatched them right out of his hands. When you're hungry and someone offers you bread, it's easy to take it, or perhaps even the stone itself. Ruby, glowing with a mix of confusion and excitement, couldn't help but react. "You've only started talking like that since you became one of those horrid, what's the word? A socialist, or something like that." Father Brown, ever the calm presence, raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "A man who wants to embrace the chimney sweep, you might call him a saint." Sir Leopold, who had been listening intently, couldn't resist a smug grin. "Oh, Ruby, my dear, I think what you mean is a socialist. A radical, perhaps." "Radical, you say?" Mr. Crook interjected with a sharp smirk. "Well, a socialist doesn't mean someone who lives on radishes, nor does a conservative mean someone who preserves jam." Father Brown's eyes twinkled. "A socialist, dear friends, is a person who wants all the chimneys swept, and all the chimney sweeps paid for. Mr. Crook tilted his head, intrigued. And what about the soot? Does one want to own soot? Father Brown's gaze softened with a touch of mystery. Well, I've heard that gardeners find it useful, and once I made 6 children very happy on Christmas Eve with a little gift of soot. The conversation swirled, each word charged with irony, humor, and a strange kind of truth. It was clear. This Christmas gathering was no ordinary family affair. It was a volatile mix of personalities, secrets, and motives all coming together. And somewhere in the midst of it all, Flambo knew something big was about to unfold. "Oh, splendid!" Ruby cried, her eyes wide with excitement. "This is exactly what we need for tonight." She was practically bouncing on her heels. Even the boisterous Canadian Mr. Blount couldn't hold back his applause, his loud voice echoing through the room. Sir Leopold Fisher, the ever-dignified financier, looked on with slight discomfort, unsure of what he had just witnessed. Just then, a knock on the front doors broke the tension. Father Brown opened them, revealing a strange scene. The front garden, a jungle of evergreens and monkey trees, framed by the last rays of a violet sunset. It was like something out of a play, surreal and out of place. But no one noticed the dust-covered figure standing in the doorway at first. He looked like any run-of-the-mill messenger, his coat frayed and worn. He stepped forward, holding a letter out to Mr. Blount with a cautious gesture. Mr. Blount froze, startled, then quickly tore open the envelope, his face flickering between confusion and curiosity. After reading it, his face cleared, and he looked up at the colonel, his voice tinged with the easy charm of a colonial gentleman. "I hate to be a bother, Colonel," he began, "but would it upset you terribly if an old acquaintance of mine stopped by tonight? He's on business with me. It's Florian, that famous French acrobat and comic actor. I knew him out west, and he seems to have something for me. I hardly know what, though." The colonel waved it off with an easy smile. "Of course, old chap. Any friend of yours is welcome, no trouble at all." But Mr. Blount wasn't done yet. His laugh was booming as he added, "If you mean he's going to black everyone's eyes, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not exactly refined, you know. I miss the old pantomimes, those where a man would sit on a top hat and make a spectacle of himself." Sir Leopold Fisher, never one to shy away from sarcasm, raised an eyebrow. "Ah, yes, that's the kind of humor you enjoy, Mr. Blount. Hardly my cup of tea, but I'm sure you'd find a way to make it entertaining." The young man in the red tie, Mr. Crook, who had been growing increasingly irritated by Sir Leopold's snobbish remarks, leaned in with a smile. "Oh, surely. There's something much lower than sitting on a top hat, isn't there, Mr. Fisher?" "A top hat sitting on you, perhaps?" said Blount, his eyes twinkling with mischief. The atmosphere in the room crackled with an unexpected shift as Mr. Blount's booming laughter echoed off the walls, a sound so contagious it spread like wildfire. "What do you say, everyone? Let's do something fun for the company tonight," he declared with an exuberance that could not be ignored. "Enough of this sitting around and staring at hats or blacking faces. I'm talking about a proper old-fashioned English pantomime. Clowns, Columbine, all the glorious chaos. I saw one back in England when I was just 12, and it's haunted me ever since. These days, they've all turned into preachy fairy tales with princesses. But tonight, I want something different. I want a hot poker, a mischievous policeman, and yes, sausages. Can't forget the sausages." His words hung in the air, setting the room alight with energy. The group immediately caught up in the whirlwind of ideas and plans. As if struck by a sudden inspiration, Mr. Crook leaned forward, eyes sparkling with mischief. "We can easily pull off a harlequin," he announced, his voice full of excitement. Simple, effective, and perfect for this madness. We've got tables, towels, baskets, everyday household items at our disposal. We can make it work. Blount's face lit up, the excitement practically radiating from him. Yes, brilliant. I'll ring up Florian. He knows every costume shop in London. I'll have him bring us a proper police outfit, and we can perform it right here in the hall. The front doors can double as the back scene. Open or shut, it'll be like magic. With a flourish, he dashed off to the phone, his enthusiasm infectious, setting the room alight with the thrill of what was to come. Ruby, nearly spinning with delight at the prospect, beamed and cried out, "Oh, Godfather, you'll be Pantaloon and I'll be Columbine." Her eyes twinkled with anticipation, her voice full of uncontainable excitement. But Sir Leopold, ever the embodiment of dignity, stiffened at the thought. With an almost imperceptible frown, he raised his chin slightly and gave a firm nod. "I think you'll find someone else for Pantaloon, my dear," he said, his voice cool and composed. "I will not be playing such a ridiculous character." The room paused in surprise, the silence hanging in the air, only for it to be broken by an unexpected voice. "I'll be Pantaloon." The colonel's words rang out, and everyone turned to look at him in stunned disbelief. He had pulled the cigar from his mouth, his face calm but resolute, a glint of something unspoken in his eyes. His tone, firm and commanding, carried an air of finality that none could ignore. The room, still suspended in that moment of surprise, was struck by a curious shift. Something about his statement held authority, a quiet confidence that demanded attention. Blount's enthusiasm showed no sign of slowing down. His face lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. "Right, everything's set. Crook will be our clown, naturally. He's a journalist. He's got all the best jokes. I'll be Harlequin, of course. It's just a matter of pulling the costume together. I've got Florian's number. He'll be here soon, and we'll have the whole thing right here in the hall. Picture it, everyone. The audience up on the stairs, and we'll have them in stitches." The energy in the room shifted again, and the group dove into action with a kind of manic energy that only came from spontaneous creativity. The house was turned into a makeshift stage. Laughter, chaos, and the joy of imagination filled every corner of the space. Ruby, swishing around in a massive skirt that looked like it had been pulled straight from the drawing room's lampshade, glowed with an infectious energy. The clown and Pantaloon, painted faces and all, wobbled around, looking every bit the part of the silly, bumbling duo. As for the Harlequin, he was wrapped in silver paper, his excitement palpable. So excited, in fact, that he nearly brought down a chandelier with a wild gesture, all in the name of looking extraordinary. Even Father Brown, normally the calm, unflappable priest, was caught up in the madness. Mr. Blount, ever the trickster, placed a paper donkey's head on him, and Father Brown's patience was truly put to the test. But nothing could compare to the hilarity of the moment when Blount, channeling the mischievous spirit of a schoolboy, tried to pin the donkey's tail to Sir Leopold's coat. Ruby, shaking her head in disbelief, exclaimed, "Uncle, you're impossible." The madness reached its pinnacle when the front doors flew open, revealing Florian, the legendary costumer, dressed as a policeman. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. Crook, who had taken to the piano with gusto, began playing the constabulary chorus from the Pirates of Penzance, but the music barely stood a chance against the uproarious laughter filling the room. Florian, standing tall in his police outfit, took center stage, his presence alone commanding attention. And then, Florian's performance, sheer brilliance. Every move, every gesture was a masterclass in comedic timing, restrained yet exaggerated to perfection. The crowd roared as he strutted and posed, a policeman like no other. Meanwhile, the Harlequin, full of wild energy, leapt forward, pretending to strike Florian over the helmet. The clown, ever eager to join in, slammed down on the piano keys with every exaggerated punch, creating a cacophony of hilarity. It wasn't just a performance, it was a riot of absurdity, wit, and slapstick humor. The laughter was non-stop, ricocheting off the walls and ringing through the house. The night had transformed into a magical, unforgettable spectacle. The climax hit with a bang. The Harlequin, now overcome with a frenzy of energy, grabbed Florian and swung him around like a rag doll. The music, now spiraling into complete absurdity, added to the chaos as Florian was tossed from one side of the room to the other, barely able to keep up. The room exploded in a frenzy of laughter. This pantomime had reached its peak, a perfect storm of ridiculousness. "Where did you get that hat, Florian?" the clown sang, delivering a resounding tap on the head as he twirled around. He turned to the audience with a dramatic shrug. "I swear, I've seen better hats at a rat's wedding." The laughter grew louder, the absurdity of it all making everyone feel lighter, free from any cares in the world. But just when it seemed like the madness might slow down, the Harlequin launched himself into the air, flinging himself into Florian's arms with all the grace of a swan in a hurricane. The entire room howled with laughter, the energy in the room reaching a fever pitch. Applause echoed through the house, and for a brief, magical moment, time seemed to freeze in the hilarity of it all. This was no ordinary Christmas night. It was a night of chaos, of reckless joy, of pure, unfiltered improv. A celebration of humor that had everyone wondering how they'd ever gotten through life without something so absurd. But then, just as the room began to calm, a shift occurred, a chill that no amount of festive energy could shake. Father Brown, still inspecting the fallen policeman, suddenly rose. A deep silence fell. His eyes flickered, and the word chloroform escaped his lips, barely audible, but enough to send a wave of unease through the group. The room, once full of mirth, now felt like it was holding its breath. Colonel Adams froze, his confident demeanor faltering. He turned slowly to Father Brown, confusion clouding his face. "You've got to be kidding me." The words seemed to slip from his mouth as his bravado faded into something darker. Father Brown's gaze cut through him like a knife, sharp and unwavering. "I know the game now," Father Brown said, his voice low and steady, but there was a certain weight to it that made everyone stop and listen. The diamonds weren't just misplaced, they were never stolen in the first place. The words hung in the air, each syllable heavy with implications. His voice was calm, but the undercurrent was clear. Something far more sinister was at play here. The silence between them stretched like a taut wire, the tension thickening with every passing second. Even the clown, once a whirlwind of wild energy, now stood frozen, his exaggerated grin faltering as he watched Father Brown move with deliberate calmness. His every step was measured, as though he knew exactly what was coming next. The figure of the fallen policeman, Florian, lay motionless on the stage, no longer just an actor in a comedy. The silence around him spoke volumes. Too still, too lifeless. Father Brown's eyes darkened, and his voice dropped to a more somber tone. The diamonds were never the true target. They were the perfect cover, the distraction we all fell for. He didn't wait for anyone to react before continuing. "We need to find Florian. He's not just playing a part, he's the key to this whole mess." The weight of his words settled in, and the room seemed to cool as the reality hit. Florian, seemingly harmless in his costume as a bumbling policeman, wasn't what he appeared. He wasn't an actor in a pantomime. He was the puppet master, pulling the strings in a far more dangerous game. The missing diamonds? A mere pawn in a game much bigger than anyone had imagined. As Father Brown approached the curtain, the full weight of his discovery began to hit home. The suspect was never the people they suspected. It was something far more insidious and far more dangerous. With swift precision, Father Brown pulled the curtain aside, his keen eyes scanning the room with practiced precision. He barely paused, sensing something vital just beyond his reach. "We're being played," he muttered, and with those words the tension in the room thickened. The game wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. The curtain had risen on a much darker stage than any of them could have imagined. The final act, however, would reveal the true thief, not one of riches, but of lives. Father Brown knew it was only a matter of time before the others would realize that the shadows had long since descended, and they were still standing in the dark. The chase was on, and no one was prepared for the truth that was about to unfold. The colonel, his voice tinged with disbelief, spoke slowly. "Father Brown, please, speak seriously. What does all this mean?" Suddenly, Father Brown broke into a fit of laughter. It was loud, unexpected, and filled the room with an almost frantic energy. But as quickly as it came, the laughter stopped. The priest, now visibly shaken, struggled to regain his composure. With a slight gasp, he managed to speak, his words tinged with urgency. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice laced with excitement, "there's no time to explain everything, but I must run after the criminal, and I'll tell you what I know. This clever French actor who played the policeman, the one who fell and danced as though possessed, he was not just some random player in a farce. No, this was all part of a much grander, much more dangerous scheme." His eyes glittered with realization as he started toward the door, but then, as if a lightning bolt had struck him, he spun around and shouted, "Pfizer!" The real policeman. He wasn't an actor at all. He was the key. The room fell into a tense silence as Father Brown rushed out, his voice trailing off in a frenzy. Outside, the garden appeared enchanted, bathed in the cool silver glow of a brilliant moon that seemed to illuminate the very air with magic. The colors of the night were impossibly vivid, deep indigos, lush greens of laurel shrubs, the moon hanging like a colossal crystal in the sky. But amid the beauty, there was something far darker lurking. A strange, glittering figure moved with impossible grace among the garden's tallest trees. It was as if this figure was made of light itself, sparkling with an otherworldly radiance as it swung from branch to branch, the moon catching every movement. The figure's descent was halted by a voice that called out from below. "Flambo, you really look like a flying star, but remember, flying stars always fall." The voice carried with it an eerie calmness, a knowing that chilled the air. The figure in the tree, now still, glanced down at the small, dark figure below, who continued to speak, his words now like a winding, poetic tale of betrayal. "You've played the part of a thief very well, Flambo, but you're more than just a petty criminal. You're an artist, an anarchist. No one suspects you, and that's why you're dangerous. You came from Canada, a Paris ticket in hand, arriving just a week after Mrs. Adams died. You knew no one would question you. You marked your day, planned your heist, and you even managed to make your escape. Disguised, clever, using the pretense of a pantomime." The voice paused, letting the weight of these words sink in. The figure in the tree did not respond. Instead, he seemed frozen in place, his glimmering costume reflecting the moonlight in dazzling patterns. "But stealing the jewels, that was nothing to you," the voice continued. "You could have done it with sleight of hand, any number of ways. But the true genius came when you used the distraction of the policeman. an illusion. A policeman who wasn't what he seemed. Flambo shifted in the tree, his mind racing, as the man below continued. You were planning to steal the diamonds, but when news came that you were suspected, you had to think faster. You hid the jewels, right under everyone's nose, in the false stage jewelry. You tricked them all, and the policeman walked right into your trap, unaware that he was part of your scheme. The voice grew more intense, almost as if it were speaking from the depths of a long-held secret. You planned everything. Everything down to the last detail, the jewels, the policeman, the pantomime, all distractions to keep the focus off you. And now you want to keep it all, don't you? You're too deep in it, Flambo, but here's the truth. You're not just a thief. You've crossed a line and there's no coming back. You're sinking deeper into this world, and it will swallow you whole. Flambo, the silver figure, seemed to freeze, caught in the grip of a harsh reality. The voice continued, relentless. You may think you're clever, but you're not invincible. Those diamonds, the lies, the tricks, they will all unravel. The world you've built for yourself will crumble. No matter how fast you run, no matter how far you hide, the consequences of your actions will catch up with you. With a sudden, startling motion, 3 diamonds, gleaming under the moonlight, fell from the tree, tumbling to the ground like stars descending from the sky. The small figure below bent to pick them up. As he did, his eyes never left the man in the tree. You have nothing left to say, Flambo, the voice whispered, low and knowing. I know everything. The final act unfolded swiftly. Father Brown appeared from the shadows, having followed the trail of deception. With the diamonds now in his possession, he returned to the stage, his mind racing. It's over, he said simply. The game's up. As the night drew to a close, the chaos and confusion began to settle. The characters, once embroiled in a web of lies, now stood at the edge of their fates. Even Leopold, whose wealth had once shielded him from the world, found himself in awe of the priest's sharp intellect. The shimmering figure seemed to freeze, caught in an otherworldly stillness. But the voice continued, its tone unwavering, cutting through the night like a blade. I want those diamonds back, and I want you to turn your back on this wretched life. You still have youth, honor, and humor in you. Don't squander them in this madness. There's always a way to live with honor. But there's no way to walk the path of evil and not have it consume you. That road, Flambo, leads only to ruin. I've seen it happen too many times. Good men who thought they could control their fate, fall, one by one, into darkness. The voice grew colder, more forceful, each word loaded with the weight of truth. Morris Bloom, once a man of the people, an anarchist fighting for the poor, ended up betraying everyone he ever cared about. Spying for both sides, no loyalty, no heart left. Harry Burke, do you remember him? He started that free money movement with the purest of intentions, but look at him now, living off the suffering of his own sister. And Lord Amber, oh, how society adored him, a man above all. Now he's nothing but a puppet, paying blackmail to the very criminals he once mocked. And Captain Barong, the fearless Apache, he died alone, hunted by the very men he once led, torn apart by his own betrayals. The small figure's voice softened, but the intensity grew sharper, biting through the still night air. You think you can run, Flambo? You think the woods will be your escape, your sanctuary. But I'm telling you, that road leads nowhere. It's a dead end. You'll disappear into those woods, yes. But one day, you'll be nothing more than a shadow, a gray, withered shell of yourself. The trees around you will seem to close in, and you'll realize too late that they've frozen your soul. You'll find no warmth there, no peace, only the memory of a man who thought he could outrun his destiny. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, crackling with the weight of the small figure's words. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The figure's voice grew colder, more dangerous. "And you've already started your descent, Flambo. Don't think for a second you can turn back now. You used to boast about living without meanness, about being above petty cruelty. But tonight you crossed a line. You've taken an innocent boy, filled his heart with doubt, and torn him away from the woman who loves him. Do you see that? Can you feel it? You've left a trail of destruction behind you. But mark my words, you will do worse before it's over. The worst is yet to come." The small figure's hand reached up, and with a flicker of movement, 3 diamonds, brilliant and cold, fell from the branches of the tree, their gleam piercing the darkness. They landed with a soft, almost reverent sound on the ground below. The figure bent low, picking them up with delicate fingers, and when he looked up, the silver figure was gone. The air seemed to still, the tree once more empty. The diamonds, those precious jewels that had sparked this entire game, were returned. And in the strange quiet that followed, there was no grand declaration, no fanfare. Only Father Brown, of all people, who had managed to orchestrate the entire twist of fate, silently watching as the pieces fell into place. The evening, once filled with chaos and absurdity, now ended in uproarious triumph. But even amidst the laughter, Sir Leopold couldn't help but pause, his mind caught in the deeper currents of the night. "Ah," he muttered with a rare smile, his voice carrying the weight of unexpected respect. "Though my views are far broader than most, I can still admire a man who lives by a creed that keeps him humble, unaware of the world's deceits, a man who stands firm, regardless of the chaos swirling around him." As the laughter of the group echoed into the night, there was a deep, almost unspoken understanding that something far greater than a mere game had been played, and the true nature of their choices, their paths, would forever linger in the air like a shadow, waiting to be reckoned with.